Back in March, US President Joe Biden signed an executive order about cryptocurrency, which instructed all relevant government agencies to produce reports about crypto and how to regulate it. The deadline for these reports was earlier this month, and last week the White House put together a summary of these reports as well as their regulatory recommendations. Today I'm going to explain what the White House's crypto framework says in simple terms and tell you exactly what it could mean for the crypto market. The document I'll be discussing today is titled, quote, Fact Sheet, White House releases first ever comprehensive framework for responsible development of digital assets. It was published on the 16th of September, and I'll leave a link to the full text in the description if you're interested. Now, the White House's crypto framework begins with a juicy statistic, and that's that around 16% of Americans hold crypto as part of their personal portfolios. This is a few percentage points shy of the 21% of Americans who have ever held crypto, according to research by NBC News. Respect to the hodlers. The authors go on to explain that crypto has the potential to, quote, reinforce US leadership in the global financial system. However, they caution that these potential benefits come with risks and cite Terra's collapse in May as an example, without naming any names. What's odd is the authors claim that Terra's collapse caused $600 billion of damage to the crypto market in the months that followed. This is highly debatable, as there were other macro factors that caused the crypto market to go lower, namely the stock market, which was also crashing around that time. In any case, the authors touch on Biden's executive order about cryptocurrency from back in March and explain that all the relevant agencies have spent 6 months putting together their respective reports. The result is a series of policy recommendations related to 6 areas of focus in the executive order. These are, quote, consumer and investor protection, promoting financial stability, countering illicit finance, US leadership in the global financial system, financial inclusion, and responsible innovation. The authors reveal that a total of 9 reports were provided to the White House by US agencies. We summarized one of them last weekend, and you can find out what crazy things that report said using the link in the description. Now, the authors also reveal that these 9 reports, quote, reflect the input and expertise of diverse stakeholders across government, industry, academia, and civil society. Obviously, there are a lot of loaded terms here, and it certainly begs the question of exactly which personnel they consulted. What's particularly questionable is that these reports focus on, quote, helping cutting-edge US firms find footholds in global markets. Now, I'm not sure who needs to hear this, but crypto isn't about private companies establishing global dominance. It's about competition between decentralized developers. Naturally, the authors also single out crypto mining as an area of concern and call for, quote, common sense efficiency standards. I reckon what counts as common sense depends on who you ask, and as the saying goes, common sense is not that common. If that wasn't spooky enough, the authors say the reports call on the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department to accelerate the development of a central bank digital currency, or CBDC. They even call for the creation of a, quote, interagency working group to develop a digital dollar. This is more significant than you think because it suggests that the Federal Reserve and Treasury Department could eventually become one and the same. In fact, some would say this is inevitable given the trend towards hyper-centralization in the financial system. Spooky stuff indeed. Now, the rest of the crypto framework gives a summary of the policy recommendations for the 6 areas of focus I mentioned earlier. You'll recall, I hope, that one of these is, quote, consumer and investor protection, which has been used to justify all kinds of things in recent years. In this case, the authors go straight for the jugular. Quote, digital assets pose meaningful risks for consumers, investors, and businesses. Not surprisingly, there is absolutely no mention of the rewards that come with greater risks, nor the benefits of cryptocurrency. Instead, the authors focus on the negatives, including crypto's volatility and the lack of transparency around cryptocurrency. Interestingly, they cite a study by the Wall Street Journal from 2018, which found that a quarter of cryptocurrency ICOs had transparency issues. That's actually not as bad as I thought. In all seriousness, the authors take it one step too far when they claim that, quote, outright fraud, scams, and theft in digital asset markets are on the rise. According to FBI statistics, reported monetary losses from digital asset scams were nearly 600% higher in 2021 than the year before. Now, there seems to be some sleight of hand going on here because crypto prices were much higher in 2021 than they were in 2020. As such, it's to be expected that the monetary losses from crypto scams would be much higher in fiat terms while staying the same in terms of frequency. Very sneaky indeed. Unfortunately, the real facts and stats are not of much concern to the authors, and they reveal the steps the current administration will take to address consumer and investor protection in cryptocurrency. First, it will instruct the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, or CFTC, to, quote, aggressively pursue investigations and enforcement actions against crypto projects and companies. Looks like the SEC is ahead of the curve on that one. Second, it will instruct the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, and Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, to, quote, monitor consumer complaints and to enforce against unfair, deceptive, or abusive practices. If the CFPB sounds familiar, that's because it's one of the many organizations that were created as part of the Dodd-Frank Act in 2010. For reference, the Dodd-Frank Act was put together by Michael Barr in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. As it so happens, Michael Barr is the current Vice Chair for Supervision at the Fed. This is significant because this position was also created by the Dodd-Frank Act. More about that and what it means for the crypto market using the link in the description. Now, the third step the current administration will take to protect consumers and investors will be to instruct various agencies to, quote, address current and emergent risks in cryptocurrency. I couldn't help but notice that the authors don't clarify what kinds of risks the administration is concerned about. Finally, the current administration will instruct the Financial Literacy Education Commission, or FLEC, to, quote, help consumers understand the risks involved. Call me crazy, but I don't think they'll be talking very much about the benefits of crypto. It also reminds me of the International Monetary Fund, or IMF's campaign to educate about, that is, promote CBDCs, and educate about, aka discredit, cryptocurrency in countries around the world. What would we do without these unaccountable international organizations, eh? Now, the second set of crypto policy recommendations relates to financial conclusion, and this is where the authors drop some more juicy statistics. Quote, roughly 7 million Americans have no bank account. Another 24 million rely on costly non-bank services. As a random fact, I first heard this statistic when listening to the testimony of cryptocurrency CEOs earlier this year, which we also summarized, by the way. Believe it or not, but around 5% of Americans are unbanked and another 14% are underbanked, meaning they use non-bank services for finance. Rather than leaning into these efficient non-bank services provided by the private sector, the authors focus on the Fed's upcoming FedNow fast payment service as the solution. Note that fast payment services are a precursor to CBDCs, according to the Bank for International Settlements, or BIS. Now, to the authors' credit, they do admit that some cryptocurrencies can make financial services more accessible, but also note that there's still lots of work to be done on that front. This is a valid point, but it again begs the question of which cryptocurrencies the authors are referring to, probably stablecoins. Regardless, the current administration is clearly dead set on the FedNow payment service. This is because it's the first step to addressing financial inclusion, which will be to, quote, encourage the adoption of the FedNow service in the US economy. What's particularly scary is that this step includes using FedNow payments, quote, in the context of distribution of disaster, emergency, or other government-to-consumer payments. Note that taxation and emergency relief is how governments around the world will likely achieve the adoption of CBDCs. And because there can't be any competition to these CBDCs, the second step the administration will take is to instruct regulators to crack down on non-banking entities. This presumably includes cryptocurrency exchanges, as many of them offer services similar to banks. In addition, the administration will, quote, align global payments practices, regulations, and supervision protocols. This means that there will be no escape from these dystopian systems once they're implemented, or at least that's the idea. To ensure that these dystopian systems are adopted at all, the administration will instruct the National Science Foundation, or NSF, plenty of acronyms in today's video, aren't there, to research, quote, behavioral economics in the context of fast payments. Basically, figure out how you can convince Americans to adopt the Fed's dystopian technology. As a fun fact, the BIS estimates that between 4 and 12% of people will voluntarily adopt CBDCs in developed countries. The question then is how they'll convince those who will not voluntarily adopt CBDCs. Knowing governments, the answer will probably involve a lot of force and financial censorship. Anyways, the third set of crypto policy recommendations relates to financial stability. Here, the authors highlight the fact that the crypto market and the existing financial system are becoming more intertwined. They specify that stablecoins is where most of these connections are. On that note, I should explain why regulators are so concerned about stablecoins. In short, it's because most stablecoins are backed by US government debt. If stablecoins become too big and there is a run on a stablecoin issuer, they could dump these treasuries' assets on the open market. This is why it's a bit silly to use the collapse of Terra's UST stablecoin as an example of how much damage crypto could do to the existing financial system. I suppose the authors don't want to reveal that centralized stablecoins are a way of subsidizing US government spending. What the authors do reveal is that the Financial Stability Oversight Council, or FSOC, will be publishing a report about the risk crypto poses to financial stability in October. This report will be more significant than you think, and that's for two reasons. First, the FSOC was also created by the Dodd-Frank Act. If you watched our aforementioned video about Michael Barr, it really looks like he's eager to use his powers and the powers of these agencies to crack down on crypto when the next financial crisis comes around. This ties into the second reason why the FSOC's upcoming report is so important, and that's because it will be released around the time the crypto market will likely be seeing its bear market lows. This would make it the perfect time for Michael and co. to exercise their powers. More about that in the description. Now, the authors go on to reference the stablecoin report put together by the President's Working Group on Financial Markets last year as a place for policymakers to start. We actually summarized that report too, and I recommend checking that video out sooner rather than later. Link is also in the description. Funnily enough, the current administration only identifies 2 steps it is planning to take to address the financial stability risks supposedly posed by cryptocurrency. The first is, quote, the Treasury will work with financial institutions to bolster their capacity to identify and mitigate cyber vulnerabilities. The second step is similarly strange, and that's to, quote, identify, track, and analyze emerging strategic risks in cryptocurrencies. The fact that the authors couldn't identify any concrete financial stability risks caused by cryptocurrencies in these 2 steps suggests that there aren't any, at least not yet. Now, the fourth set of crypto policy recommendations relate to advancing, quote, responsible innovation. The authors start with another statistic, and that's that around half of the most valuable tech companies in the world are based in the United States. This might have something to do with all the backdoor deals these tech companies have with US intelligence agencies, but hey, let's not go there. Ironically, the authors underscore the US government's role in facilitating technological innovation in the private sector. If you're wondering just how innovative the government can be, check out our recent video about weather modification. Link will be in the description, of course. Now, factual conspiracies aside, the authors jump straight to the steps that the administration will take to preserve the peculiar dynamic between the public and private sectors. The first step will be to instruct the Office of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP, to, quote, develop a digital assets research and development agenda. If you watched our aforementioned video about one of the White House's reports, you'll know that the OSTP isn't all that scientific. Meanwhile, the aforementioned NSF will, quote, back social science and education research that develops methods of informing, educating, and training diverse groups of stakeholders. Sounds good on the surface, but there always seems to be something bad lurking down below with these crypto initiatives. Now, the second step will be to instruct the Treasury Department and other financial regulators to, quote, provide innovative US firms developing new financial technologies with regulatory guidance, best practices sharing, and technical assistance. This could actually be a very good thing if done right, because institutional investors have been itching for the regulatory clarity they need to invest in cryptocurrency. The regulatory uncertainty caused by Ethereum's transition to proof of stake is particularly concerning to both retail and institutions alike. The third step will be to instruct various environmental regulators to, you guessed it, quote, track digital assets' environmental impacts, develop performance standards as appropriate, and provide local authorities with the tools, resources, and expertise to mitigate environmental harms. The authors add that, quote, opportunities exist to align the development of digital assets with transitioning to a net zero emissions economy and improving environmental justice. This makes me wonder if they really will ban proof of work and whether they'll use some unscientific justification to do so. Now, the fourth and final step is interesting, as it involves, quote, establishing a standing forum to convene federal agencies, industry, academics, and civil society to exchange knowledge and ideas that could inform federal regulation, standards, coordinating activities, technical assistance, and research support. If the getting of all hands on deck to address cryptocurrency is not a sign that the government are threatened by crypto adoption, I don't know what is. Anywho, the fifth set of crypto policy recommendations relate to the status of the United States as a leader of the status quo of global finance, as well as the country's financial competitiveness. Incredibly, the authors commence by saying the quiet part out loud. Quote, today, global standard-setting bodies are establishing policies, guidance, and regulatory recommendations for digital assets. The United States is working actively with its partners to set out these policies in line with our goals. In other words, unelected international organizations such as the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, act in accordance with the interests of the United States. What's even more telling is that the authors explain that the United States has a, quote, valuable opportunity to partner with countries still developing their digital asset ecosystems. In other words, the US is positioned to ensure that its dominance of the global financial system continues. To ensure all of the above, the administration will take the following steps. First, it will leverage the power of international organizations like the FATF to ensure, quote, US values find their way into cryptocurrency. Note, this is code for financial control and financial surveillance, not freedom and liberty. Second, the administration will instruct various government agencies to partner with similar government agencies around the world. Oddly enough, this step does not include any mention of cryptocurrency, so maybe it's just a way of sneaking in some more global governance stuff. Third, the administration will help developing countries develop their digital asset infrastructure. If the IMF's help is anything to go by, this aid will come with lots of strings attached. Fourth, the administration will, quote, help cutting-edge US financial technology and digital asset firms find a foothold in global markets for their products. This step also doesn't mention crypto, but I have a feeling this is a reference to regulated stablecoin issuers like Circle. If you missed the memo, Circle has started releasing stablecoins for other fiat currencies, notably the euro. I reckon it would be in the interest of the United States for Circle to provide its digital currency infrastructure to countries in Europe. It's certainly in the interest of BlackRock, which backs Circle. More about BlackRock in the description. Anyhow, the sixth set of policy recommendations relate to the favourite topic of anti-crypto critics, and that's illicit activity in cryptocurrency. The authors begin by revealing that the United States has been the entity pushing for KYC around the world. The authors then say something extremely concerning, and that's, quote, "While our efforts have strengthened the US financial system, digital assets, some of which are pseudonymous and can be transferred without a financial intermediary, have been exploited by bad actors." If you don't understand why this is so concerning, consider that every single cryptocurrency is pseudonymous and that every single cryptocurrency can be transferred without a financial intermediary. They're not talking about privacy coins here, they're talking about all cryptos. This rhetoric is consistent with the FATF's endgame of killing crypto by labeling any crypto transaction or activity that doesn't involve a regulated intermediary as high risk. And over time, the FATF will pressure countries to cease providing services to individuals and institutions who are high risk. As expected, the authors go on to give examples of crypto being used by bad actors for illicit purposes, and I couldn't help but notice that they didn't provide any statistics as concrete evidence. That's probably because they know that only 0.15% of all crypto transactions are related to illicit activity. For context, between 2 and 5% of all fiat transactions are related to illicit activity. This is despite all the extensive KYC and AML that's been enforced around the world by the FATF. As a matter of fact, it seems that the FATF's so-called recommendations have done next to nothing to reduce illicit finance over the last 30 years. All they've done is create a multi-billion-dollar industry of compliance companies and justified lots of government overreach. More about all that in the description. Now, when it comes to the steps the current US administration will take to combat illicit activity in cryptocurrency, the first will be to call on US politicians to expand the Bank Secrecy Act to all of crypto. The authors explicitly state that this coverage will include DeFi and NFTs. This means that every crypto transaction worth more than $10,000 would have to be reported to the authorities, including peer-to-peer crypto transactions, which you'll recall the authorities want to get rid of. Case in point, the administration will also push politicians to, quote, raise the penalties for unlicensed money transmitting, which presumably means going after DeFi protocols and possibly even crypto wallets. It will also push politicians to let the Department of Justice, quote, prosecute digital asset crimes in any jurisdiction where a victim of those crimes is found. To my understanding, this means the US government could go after crypto crimes anywhere in the world. Now, the second step the administration will take is to instruct the Treasury Department to publish 2 reports about the illicit finance risks of DeFi and NFTs. These reports will be released by the end of February and by July next year, respectively. We'll be sure to cover those when they come out. Now, the third step the administration will take is to, quote, continue to expose and disrupt illicit actors and address the abuse of digital assets. The details of this step suggest we will see more sanctions against crypto projects and protocols like Tornado Cash. The fourth step the administration will take is to work with the private sector to make sure it understands the illicit financing risks of cryptocurrency. I suspect this will include labeling certain crypto activities as high risk, as per the FATF's game plan. I also couldn't help but notice that the authors reveal that, quote, the CFPB, an independent agency, also voluntarily provided information to the administration as to risks arising from digital assets. This is suspicious, as you'll recall that the CFPB was created by the Dodd-Frank Act, which was written by an individual who seems to be out to kill cryptocurrency. Watch out. Now, the final part of the White House's crypto policy recommendations relate to a digital dollar CBDC. It seems that this was snuck in as well, since it wasn't exactly emphasized at the beginning of the fact sheet. The authors start by talking about all the benefits that a digital dollar would bring, benefits that could just as easily be achieved by an existing non-bank entity or cryptocurrency. These include financial inclusion, cross-border payments, the usual talking points. It's towards the end of the first paragraph where the authors reveal the real reason why the US government wants a digital dollar, and that's because it could, quote, help preserve US global financial leadership and support the effectiveness of sanctions. As the recent sanctions against Russia's central bank have shown, however, these two goals seem to be mutually exclusive. No sane country would adopt a digital dollar if it meant the US government could effectively turn off its economy at the flick of a switch. This degree of power would be possible if the USD maintains its reserve currency status in a digital form, hence why the two goals are mutually exclusive. Either the USD remains neutral to be the world's reserve currency, or it is weaponized at the expense of this status. The more you know. Now, the authors reveal that, quote, the administration has developed policy objectives for a US CBDC system which reflect the federal government's priorities for a potential US CBDC. Put differently, the ball is already rolling towards the creation of a digital dollar. The authors reiterate that the Treasury Department will work hand in hand with the Federal Reserve to develop a digital dollar, again foreshadowing the possibility of these two entities merging, as many have predicted. And, of course, there was no mention of all the downsides of a CBDC. If you've watched any of our videos about CBDCs, you'll know that they will give governments the power to decide how you spend, where you spend, and what you spend your money on, and even how much you can save. That's just on the individual level. At the economic level, CBDCs will make borrowing extremely expensive due to their effects on bank lending and profitability. Good luck getting a mortgage. It'll also mean that the stock market itself will be manipulated. Think Robinhood blocking trades during the GameStop saga, but on steroids. So, this brings me to the big question, and that's what the White House's crypto framework means for the crypto market. To be blunt, it's not good. It's clear that the current administration wants to crush cryptocurrency. If you've seen any of our summaries of crypto-related testimonies, this should not come as a surprise. Logically then, it means that the success of the crypto policy recommendations laid out in the framework ultimately depends on what happens during the next election cycles in the United States. It looks like pro-crypto politicians will gain ground in the upcoming midterms, but at this point it's anyone's guess as to what the outcome of the 2024 election will be. That's going to be the more significant election since it's around the time the next crypto bull run should come. Take note. If pro-crypto politicians do gain ground in the upcoming midterms, then I reckon most of these anti-crypto policies will never be pursued. Then again, so many of them are being undertaken by unelected officials that have been appointed by anti-crypto politicians, so it's uncertain. One thing is for sure, however, and that's that a wave of regulation is coming to the crypto industry. Some of it will be reasonable, and we could see large institutional inflows as a result. It's the unreasonable regulation that we must be on the lookout for. This includes labeling of all crypto-related activities as high risk as a way of choking off and eventually killing the industry. Given that the United States is behind the international organizations engaging in this kind of guerrilla regulation, American voters might be the ones who decide what comes next for crypto at the end of the day. As such, I strongly suggest that any American viewers inform themselves about pro-crypto candidates in their areas. You'll notice that pro-crypto politicians sit on both sides of the aisle, so you should be able to find one you can support regardless of your political stripes. I'll leave a link to Coinbase's Crypto Politician tool in the description if you need it, and I'll leave you with this thought. The crypto world is counting on you to make sure financial freedom continues. Financial freedom is required for everything else. Last I checked, freedom is an American value. So, let's see it ring. And that's all for today's video about the White House's crypto policy recommendations. If you found it informative, feel free to share it so other American crypto holders know what's at stake. Remember to smash that like button to give us a boost in the algorithm, and subscribe to the channel and ping that notification bell so you don't miss our next spicy crypto summary. While you wait for that, you can check out Coin Bureau clips for behind the scenes and live streams, and check out the Coin Bureau podcast for in-depth crypto discussions that will blow your mind. Feel free to follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and join my Telegram for daily crypto updates you can't afford to miss. If you're wondering what cryptos I'm holding during this bear market, subscribe to my weekly newsletter to find out. It's also where I give you my predictions for what comes next. And if you want to support the channel, head on over to the Coin Bureau merch store and get yourself some crypto apparel that will keep you warm this winter. You can find your way there and to all the other resources I mentioned using the links in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Till then, stay cool, stay safe, and stay crypto.